Welcome to USA News Channel. Please like and subscribe for the first get new video update from us. Thank you.
With the new year just around the corner, a local think tank summed up an outlook on international affairs for 2018, included our speculations on North Korea's missile technology and what would happen if they were to complete it. Lee Jung-hyun zooms in on the KNDA analysis.
American military might on display near the Korean Peninsula. Here, a rare sight. 3 U.S. aircraft carriers, so-called super carriers, brought together last month for the first time in a decade. And now, the U.S. decision to hold another round of air exercises has raised tensions again. On Monday, 5 days of air drills will begin. The largest ever joint drills with U.S. and South Korean forces. They'll simulate airstrikes on mock North Korean nuclear and missile targets. This comes as President Trump's national security advisor warns the possibility of war with Pyongyang is increasing by the day.
The greatest immediate threat to the United States and to the world is the threat posed by the rogue regime in North Korea and his continued efforts to develop a long-range nuclear capability. There are ways to address this problem short of armed conflict, but it is a race because he's getting closer and closer, and there's not much time left.
In North Korea, news of the military exercises drew dire warnings.
If the Korean Peninsula and the world are embroiled in the crucible of a nuclear war because of the reckless nuclear war mania of the United States, the US must take full responsibility for it.
On Friday, North Korea held a mass event celebrating the success of recent weapons tests. The latest one sent a missile higher than ever before, putting the continental United States in striking range. Now, Pyongyang is rushing to perfect its weapons technology, including the development of a nuclear warhead that can fit on a missile. Kim Jong-un is getting closer to his nuclear ambitions. Here, he inspects a factory making tires for missile launch vehicles. Some are quick to brush off the exchange of threats between Kim Jong-un and the Trump administration, dismissing them as bluster. But as the U.S. and North Korea ramp up their military capabilities, making no secret the other is the target, it raises the prospect that one misstep, one miscalculation, could ignite a sudden military confrontation, claiming hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of lives. Celia Hatton, BBC News.
And I'm joined now by Charles Grant, director at the think tank, the Centre for European Reform, who's just returned to London from a security conference in Washington, where he's been speaking to US officials about North Korea. Thanks very much for joining us here at the BBC News Channel, Charles. So what intelligence have you gathered from those 3 days of discussions about what might happen next between the US and North Korea?
I think we're rather closer to military action by the US than perhaps many of us in Europe realise or have been thinking recently. It's not to say it's certain, but what I learnt was that many people at a senior level in the US administration don't believe that deterrence can work, i.e. the idea that North Korea wouldn't attack us because we'd whack it if it did. They think the nature of the regime may not be susceptible to deterrence. They are worried that now that Korean missiles can reach US cities, that there may be an attempt to sort of blackmail the US into taking its troops out of the South Korea so the whole Korean peninsula can be reunified. And Trump has said he will not allow US cities to be threatened. So I think my view on recent conversations is unless the Chinese can tighten the economic squeeze around Korea and make the North Koreans think twice about continuing their current policies, then military action is certainly a possibility.
Is it possible, do you think, to tighten that economic squeeze? Will China play ball with that, for example?
The Chinese seem reluctant to tighten sanctions significantly, for example, by cutting off oil supplies. If they did, they could probably bring the North Korean regime to heel quite quickly, but they don't seem to want to do that. They don't want chaos and pandemonium in North Korea. They don't want the regime to collapse. So I think time is running out, and certainly, I mean, the main argument against taking military action is that most people think that if the US did strike North Korea, South Korea would be immediately struck by lots of artillery shells from the north, and a lot of South Koreans would get killed. So the South Koreans are very nervous indeed, but that factor doesn't necessarily seem to make it certain that Trump will not take military action against the north.
What was your sense from those 3 days of talks about how far planning for an attack by the US is advanced, and how far is planning advanced for whatever scenario might follow an attack?
I think planning is advanced, and I think there is certainly talk amongst senior officials of a kind of surgical strike, a modest attack on North Korea's military facilities to teach Kim Jong-un a lesson rather than an all-out war. But of course, the danger is that even a fairly modest set of precision strikes could still provoke the North to rain fire on the South, as they put it, and kill an awful lot of South Koreans. So it's not clear that even a modest attack wouldn't have pretty ghastly consequences.
And was anyone prepared to say anything to you about the personalities involved here when you look at Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, I beg your pardon? Well,
US officials keep saying this country, North Korea, is run by a madman, so deterrence won't apply as normal to that country. Of course, some people more critical of the US think that North Korea is not the only country run by a madman.
With North Korea's latest test of its Hwasong-15 ICBM in November, the world was left speculating what its next move would be. A South Korean think tank has attempted to provide some answers. In its report Outlook on International Affairs for 2018, the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security says the biggest task left for the regime is to perfect its missile technology, with the remaining parts being re-entry technology.
A successful missile launch must have three things: launch trajectory, position control, and re-entry. North Korea's missiles currently have the first two, but not re-entry.
But why is re-entry technology so important?
Re-entry is what allows a nuclear warhead to withstand extreme heat and pressure when passing through the Earth's atmosphere. Without it, the missile would not be able to drop nuclear weapons onto its target area. That's why it's so important.
The expert added that there are two possible scenarios for the future. One, North Korea doesn't succeed in its re-entry technology next year, in which case they will continue testing ICBMs. But the second scenario is what's drawing the most attention. If they do succeed, they will most likely seek disarmament talks with the United States.
North Korea will most likely demand to be recognized as a nuclear state and to keep a certain level of nuclear technology in exchange for limiting their ICBM capabilities enough to attack neighboring countries.
The expert added that the timeline in which this would happen could vary from a few months to a few years, but it is only a matter of time, and when that time comes, the U.S. and the regime's neighboring countries such as South Korea and Japan must decide on how to respond to North Korea's request to be recognized as a nuclear state. Lee Jung-yeon, Arirang News.
We just have a preliminary statement coming out of South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff confirming that there's an unidentified ballistic missile fired from Pyeongseong in South Pyongyang to the east. And we still don't know anything further about the nature of this missile, the range of it. What is striking about this is that it's coming after a pause of more than 2 months where North Korea had not fired any missiles. Another thing that's got me scratching my head right now is the timing of it. If you go back 3, 4, 5 months, Brooke, North Korea was firing these missiles on almost a weekly basis for some stretches, but it almost always took place at dawn Korea time. And this is taking place now at around 3 o'clock in the morning, around that time. So it doesn't fit the pattern that we've seen in the past. And this missile launch will raise some serious questions because it comes so soon after President Trump made his tour of Asian countries and made a big show of joining not only allies South Korea and Japan to put additional pressure on isolating North Korea, but also met with Xi Jinping and after China sent an envoy just days ago to Pyongyang to meet with the North Koreans. So we're still waiting to find out the nature of this missile launch, how far, and the altitude of this potential missile. This is very much developing as we speak now, Brooke.
No, it's an excellent point on the timing, and that this doesn't fit with the pattern that we saw over those couple of months where we would see them often and at dawn. Ivan Watson, don't go too far for me. I want to continue this with Ryan Brown, who is our Pentagon reporter, and I understand you're getting some new information from the Pentagon. What are you hearing about this missile launch?
Well, that's right, Brooke. We just spoke with the head spokesman for the Pentagon, Colonel Rob Manning. He just told us that the U.S. did detect what is being called a probable missile launch from North Korea about 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, that's all the information they're providing right now. They say they're continuing to assess this launch, that they will provide more information as it becomes available, but now confirmation from the Pentagon that the U.S. military detected a missile launch from North Korea at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, again, earlier in the day, U.S. military officials told me that there had been some movement of missile material in North Korea in the last 48 hours. They had seen some movement had been detected, but there was no clear sign of a major missile launch being imminent. So now, now the Pentagon saying that a launch did in fact occur, and they're currently assessing to see what kind of missile it was. Was it a short-range missile? Was it a medium-range? Was it an ICBM? These are the things that they'll be reviewing now, looking at the data that they have.
So we don't know the type of launch, to your point. We also, correct me, Ryan, but it's so early, we still don't even know if it's a launch where the missile took the trajectory over Japan, as one has in the past, or as North Korea promised, toward the U.S. territory of Guam. We still don't know, correct?
That's correct. No information about where the trajectory of the missile was provided at this time. I also asked whether or not the missile at any time posed any risk to anyone, any U.S. personnel or others. No information available on that as well. So we don't know much about this missile, but now the Pentagon at least confirming that a probable missile launch did occur in North Korea.